Hello, and welcome to Getting It Done, a podcast about music, education, and life lessons. I'm your host, Tim Rausenberger, and today is Friday, June 28th, 2019. This is episode 290, 5 Causes of Boredom and Fixing Them. Why are people so bored? What causes boredom? These two questions have haunted me throughout the entire month of June. I have had more students, colleagues, friends, family members, people from all walks of life, young, old, and everything in between, come up to me and say, "I'm so bored. This weekend is going to be so boring. This day off is going to be boring. This break we have coming up, the entire summer, I'm going to probably be very bored." I can't begin to tell you how many people have come up and said that to me. So it got me thinking, what causes boredom? And this was a tough question for me because, quite honestly, most of my life, I've never been bored. I just haven't been. And I wanted to figure out, why is it that I never really find myself to be bored, but there are so many other people out there who do? Did some research on the internet. And not surprisingly, the results completely varied. In terms of the psychological components associated with boredom, they didn't really change too much. They were pretty consistent across the boards, and I'm not going to spend time going through that stuff because, quite frankly, that's not really the reason you came on here, is it? Not really, because you came on because you want to know what those 5 things are, and more importantly, you want ways to try to improve them. And that's probably the reason you're watching this, and you don't want to hear any more from me until you know what those 5 things are. So here they come. Number 1, no time structure. Number 2, no creativity. Number 3, no focus. Number 4, no physical interaction. And number 5, no mental stimulation. It's interesting that the 5th one has the word stimulation, because in 2019 we have more stimuli out there than ever before in the history of humankind. With all the advances in technology, with all of the different things that a person can do, regardless of age, how could anyone possibly be bored? Yet, we are. I think the root of boredom starts with the first item, which is why I have it as number 1. No time structure. In other words, when we have our lives organized and structured properly, we do better. And that's just fact. When I was growing up, my structure was a little bit different than it is now, but not entirely different than what a student experiences in 2019 as opposed to what I experienced back in the 1980s. The school day was essentially the same hours. Everybody had to sleep. We all have to eat. We have to get clothed. We have to get bathed. We have all the different types of activities we can do. So, what has changed? What's so different? The difference now has nothing really to do with what happens, and I don't like to use this because there are a lot of people that do work on weekends, but I'm just going to say with the Monday to Friday, because I'm going to just keep this to my students for right now, and people who do work schedules that go from Monday through Friday. And it comes down to those evenings and weekends and breaks and vacations and the summers off. The biggest fundamental difference between then and now is that most people don't have much structure during that downtime unless it's given to them. And that's ironic because when I was younger, I did figure out how I was going to structure my day, and I didn't have Google Calendar, and I didn't necessarily make a list, and I didn't have specific goals, but it was still structured. See, a lot of people I know, when they have free time, their organized schedule goes into the toilet, which is not good. Think about it. When you go from Monday through Friday, we're just going to focus specifically on, we'll throw away Sunday night. We'll just say Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. You really have to follow some type of schedule, because if you don't, especially in relation to your sleep, the time that you go to sleep and the time that you wake up, if you don't do that, you're probably going to feel lousy one of the days of the week, and you don't want to. Or you're going to be running late for school or for work. And you don't want that to happen either. The problem begins immediately when the school day, the work day, ends on Friday. And what do? Do you stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning? Do you have any idea what type of impact that has on you going into the entire weekend and then trying to get up on Monday morning and do your entire routine again? Now, I'm not saying to not have fun. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go out and play. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a good time. But it's entirely possible to do that without completely destroying all sense of structure and organization in your life. And I'm proof positive of that, because I can tell you, for most of my life, when I was a student, my childhood, college, well, not really college, but certainly my adult life, I cannot begin to tell you how many weekends I would go to bed so late and wake up so late the next day, and by Monday morning, I was a mess because the structure wasn't there. Now, I talked a little bit about my childhood for a minute, about the structure. Oh, there was structure over the summer and on the weekends and after school. But you see, the structure was just ingrained in my brain. I always knew that I wanted to get onto my bicycle and ride somewhere. I may have had a specific destination in mind. Sometimes I didn't. I just went with the flow. Made sure that my family knew where I was going to be going. No cell phones back then. And what time I was going to be home. And I followed the rules. Other days, I engaged in sports. Some of them were organized, some of them weren't. A lot of them weren't. There were days in which I would just play baseball or stickball or wiffle ball all day. And that's going to tie into some of these other items on the list. So let's get to these other ones. So attacking your structure is critical. And if it may mean that you need to sit down with a calendar and go hour by hour, 15-minute chunk at a time, and fill in all the blanks. That might be what you need. Other people might need specific goals that they have set for the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. Or just for the day, or just for the week, or the weekend, or the summer. Everyone is different. I'm not going to tell you one specific method. That's ridiculous. We're all different people. We're all coming from different walks of life. So let's go into number 2, no creativity. How in the world, in 2019, when we have so many different resources available to us, when we have apps on our phones, when we have phones, when we have computers, when we have technology, we have stimuli faster than ever, better than ever, and the ability to be smarter than ever, yet the creativity seems to be void. How can that be? Well, we can start off by going into texting. There's just about nothing creative about texting, and more specifically, I'm talking about taking pictures of a person, adding filters. When you're doing that, it's not that it's a bad thing, and there's nothing wrong with doing it from time to time to be goofy. I find that not just students, I find adults doing this, spending hours upon hours, and the problem comes in, you see, it's not that they're doing it, it's that they're using the artwork and the materials that someone else has created for them and thrown them on. That's not creativity. Now, if you've designed your own artwork, that's different. If your ambition is to do what one of my students did recently, in which they took a whole slew of videos that they compiled throughout the entire school year, and then they put them all together into one big video. Now that's creativity. But there are a lot of people that just don't have that. It's not that they don't have it inside of them, but they don't tap into that part of their brain with any type of regularity. And some people don't do it at all. So you've got to find ways to be creative. One of the greatest things about my job as a teacher is I have the ability to be creative every single day. No lesson has to be exactly the same. And that's not just for music, that's for any subject. But if you think about it, folks, you can do that in any walk of life. Even the most mundane tasks can be done with some flair of creativity. But are you doing it? That's the question. Now, number 3, no focus. I have to confess, I came up with the no focus as a replacement for another word: monotony. Doing the same thing over and over and over and over. Now, I am not talking about the commute to work. That's not it. I am not talking about the fact that we have to eat every single day. And I'm not talking about the fact that we have to bathe ourselves every single day. That's not the monotony I'm talking about. I'm talking about the type of monotony that causes you to not be focused. The monotony where you have to do something because someone else has told you that you need to do it for whatever the reason is, and you don't like it. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. I never liked to read when I grew up. Do you know why? Because I didn't like the books that were given to me. It turns out in the end, it had nothing to do with the fact that I didn't like to read. It had to do with the fact that I didn't like the books that were given to me to read. Because if you gave me a sports book, I could polish that off with no problem. As a matter of fact, by the time I graduated elementary school, every single book on sports in the school library I had read. So, where's the problem? The problem is it's really, really difficult for anyone to focus on something that doesn't interest them. And that's where the monotony comes in. When you're at work and you have that one particular task that you have to do every day, you don't have a choice in the matter, it's irritating and it can cause you to lose focus. And then you get bored and you get annoyed. Now, boredom can be tied into being tired. Boredom can lead to daydreaming, but it's not the other way around. When you're tired, that doesn't mean that you're bored. I don't like when people say that. If you're tired, you're truly tired. I was tired several weeks ago. You know how I was tired? I was working hard. It had nothing to do with boredom. I do daydream. I've daydreamed every single day. I daydream. It has nothing to do with being bored. It has to do with different types of thoughts that are entering my brain. Usually has to do with creativity. Daydreaming is not a bad thing at all. There's nothing bad about it. Now, if you're daydreaming 24 hours a day, that's a different story. But if you spend a little bit of time each day daydreaming, that's usually going to tap into your creativity. Boredom can lead to daydreaming, which is not the worst thing in the world. Boredom leading to being tired, that's a little bit different. Yeah, sitting there doing absolutely nothing is going to lead you to being tired. Sitting there being bored. Number 4, no physical interaction. I never struggled with this growing up. As a matter of fact, I never struggled with it growing up, while I was in college, or at any point during my adult life, because I was always interacting with people, with objects, with places. And I realized the few times in my life where I was bored or I got into that funk, it was because I noticed that I was not interacting physically with other people or things. And a classic example is cooping up yourself inside of your dwelling and not leaving, and staying there for an entire weekend, and not even stepping out to get any fresh air. That's going to definitely be a big reason that you could be bored, because you're not physically interacting. And I'm sorry, again, proof positive. You can text all you want, or message, or whatever the kids are doing these days, whether it's on Instagram, Snapchat, any type of social networking. It's not physical interaction, folks. It just isn't. It's not the same as seeing a person face to face. And it's not even the same as just picking up the phone and actually talking to the person on the phone. Way different. And if you find yourself bored, I strongly encourage you, if you are doing those things, break the streak, break the pattern, and get outside, call someone, find someone random, do something that's going to take you out of your comfort zone, but interact with the outdoors. Because if you just go into your backyard or you walk down the street, you're going to have some type of interaction. And that's a heck of a lot healthier than just staying inside of the same dwelling, because that's going to lead to monotony, and you're not being creative. And then you have the boss combination if there's no time structure, because it leads to number 5, no mental stimulation. Most of the things that we do online do not involve any mental stimulation. Most of the things we do on our phones do not lead to any mental stimulation. If you're watching most popular YouTube videos, you're not being stimulated. But what's interesting is those videos are actually more likely to bring you in. Why? Well, they're produced well, and they've been done in such a way to bring you in. Plus, if you see a video that's recommended because it has 1 million views, you've got to see what 1 million other people are doing. Or can you become that person that pulls up this video that doesn't have 1 million views? And I'll just say, yet. Because, my friends, when you have too many stimuli and too many directions to go, there's nothing that's really going on up here. You're just trying to act on everything as fast as humanly possible. And if it's taken away from you, if that phone is taken away from you, or you lose internet, there are people that go completely crazy and they don't know what to do with themselves. And that's where we're at as a society. And people blame children for this, and they say it's all the... Well, guess what? The kids are now growing up. And I witnessed several graduations this past week. A majority of the people who were at the graduations could not resist the temptation to look at their phones, and that included the graduates. That included people of every age category. They couldn't resist it. At such a momentous occasion, they had to look at their phones. They couldn't resist. And I would sit there for 2-3 hours. I wouldn't look at my phone once. It's interesting, isn't it? So, if you look at all 5 of these items, they all contribute in some way of being bored. So, how do you fix these different items? No time structure. Develop a structure. And unfortunately, if you are working that job and you're working for someone else is dictating what your structure is going to be. If you are a child, there's sadly someone or people who are dictating everything that you need to do. And perhaps if you're a parent, it's time to stop doing that and start telling the child, you need to develop your schedule, not you developing it for them, because if you develop it for them the entire time, what's going to happen when they're older? Are you going to continue to develop their schedule for them? Because it's not exactly fair to be getting upset at a child for their inability to create if they've never been given the opportunity to do so. You need to break the cycle in terms of monotony. And you need to find ways to be creative when you have those moments. I had them when I was in school. I had those subjects that were torture for me. And it wasn't because of the subject area. It was because of what was being taught at that time by the person who was teaching me and the specific material that was being presented at that particular time of the year. So when it came to certain components of math, a subject I love, it was torture. With almost everything having to do with English, it was the worst because there were a lot of books I didn't enjoy. With social studies, most areas of history I enjoyed. Mesopotamia was not one of them. And I don't think it's necessarily Mesopotamia. It had to do with the instructor. No physical interaction. That's not hard. You've just got to do it. You got to get out of your house. You can't just stay there all day. You need to get some fresh air. And if you're like me, where I'm in graduate school right now, and I'm finishing up my master's degree, and I have so much work I have ahead of me this coming weekend, I do not work straight through. I will take a break every 45 minutes to an hour. I'll just take some type of break. And more often than not, I'll just go outside. I might drive somewhere for a short period of time and come back. I may just take a walk down the street, go into my yard for a little while, or just put some music on. And even if I don't leave the house, at least I'm just breaking up. Number 3, the monotony. Because after all, we need number 5, the mental stimulation, to get all of these other things into effect. Boredom can be cured. Boredom can be fixed. And just like everything else, you have to be the one to make the change.